The story of how the British entered and ruled India is a complex narrative of trade, diplomacy, military conquest, and colonization, which unfolded over nearly 3 centuries. The British first came to India as traders, but by the time they left in 1947, they had reshaped the country's political, social, and economic fabric. Here's a detailed full story. In 1600, Queen Elizabeth I of England granted a royal charter to the East India Company, giving it the monopoly of English trade in the East Indies. At this time, India was a fragmented region under the rule of the Mughal Empire, with powerful regional kingdoms in southern and western India. The first trading post was established in Surat, Gujarat, in 1612 after the company secured permission from Mughal Emperor Jahangir to trade. Throughout the 17th century, the British were one of many European traders in India. The Portuguese, Dutch, and French had established their own trading settlements. For much of this period, the British relied on diplomacy, trade agreements, and sometimes military skirmishes to gain control over key trading centers. However, the company's ambitions were not limited to trade. It began to involve itself in local politics, capitalizing on the weakening of the Mughal Empire and the rise of regional powers. The East India Company's transition from a trading corporation to a political and military power began with the Battle of Plassey in 1757. This battle marked a turning point in British ambitions in India. After this victory, the British established control over Bengal, India's richest province, by installing Mir Jafar as the puppet ruler. This gave the British direct control over Bengal's vast revenues. In 1764, the company secured another major victory in the Battle of Buxar against a coalition of Indian rulers, including the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II, the Nawab of Oudh, and Mir Qasim, the Nawab of Bengal. This battle solidified British dominance in northern India. As a result of their victory, the British were granted the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa in 1765, allowing them to collect taxes directly from these provinces. By the end of the 18th century, the British expanded their influence through a combination of military victories and diplomatic agreements, often exploiting the internal conflicts of Indian kingdoms. Lord Wellesley, Governor-General from 1798 to 1805, used the subsidiary alliance system to bring Indian princely states under British control. Indian rulers who signed these agreements had to maintain British troops and could not engage in foreign diplomacy without British approval. The British fought a series of wars against Tipu Sultan, the ruler of Mysore, eventually defeating him in 1799 at the Battle of Seringapatam, bringing southern India under British influence. The British also defeated the Marathas, who were a major power in central and western India, through 3 wars. By 1818, after the Third Anglo-Maratha War, the British were the dominant power across most of India. The British East India Company's oppressive policies led to widespread discontent among various sections of Indian society, including Indian soldiers, landowners, and peasants. The introduction of the Enfield rifle, which required sepoys to bite off the cartridges greased with animal fat, offended both Hindu and Muslim soldiers. Policies like the doctrine of lapse and the confiscation of lands from local rulers without heirs further fueled anger. High taxes, the destruction of traditional industries, and the exploitation of Indian agriculture for British profits led to widespread suffering. The rebellion, also known as the First War of Indian Independence or the Sepoy Mutiny, began in Meerut and quickly spread to major cities like Delhi, Kanpur, and Lucknow. It was a violent uprising, but after fierce battles, the British suppressed the revolt in 1858. Following the suppression of the rebellion, the British government dissolved the East India Company and took direct control of India. This marked the beginning of the British Raj. The British Crown formally assumed control of India. A viceroy was appointed as the representative of the British monarch, and all administrative functions were overseen by the British Parliament. The British transformed India's economy to serve their own interests, with devastating consequences for India. Indian textile and handicraft industries were undermined by British policies that promoted British manufactured goods. India became a supplier of raw materials and a market for British products. Several catastrophic famines occurred during British rule, such as the Great Bengal Famine of 1770 and the Bengal Famine of 1943, which were exacerbated by British economic policies that prioritize export of food and resources over local needs. India's resources were systematically drained to finance Britain's industrial revolution and global empire. While exploitative, the British did introduce some modern infrastructure, including railways. The British built an extensive railway network, primarily to facilitate the transport of goods and troops. By 1900, India had one of the largest railway networks in the world. Telegraphs, roads, and ports. These were expanded for communication and trade, benefiting the colonial economy. The late 19th century saw the rise of Indian nationalism, with educated Indians beginning to challenge British rule. Key events and figures included: Indian National Congress, formed in 1885, became the leading platform for Indian demands for greater political rights and eventually full independence. Swadeshi movement 1905. This was a reaction to the partition of Bengal, where Indians boycotted British goods and promoted Indian-made products. The early 20th century saw the emergence of Mahatma Gandhi, who transformed the independence movement through his philosophy of non-violent resistance. Gandhi called for Indians to boycott British goods, institutions, and taxes, and led a 240-mile march to protest the British salt monopoly, a highly symbolic act that galvanized nationwide support. During World War II, the INC launched the Quit India movement, demanding immediate independence. After years of struggle, negotiations, and mass movements, India finally achieved independence on August 15, 1947. However, independence came with the painful partition of India into two nations, India and Pakistan. This partition led to one of the largest mass migrations in history and widespread communal violence, with millions displaced and hundreds of thousands killed. The British entered India as traders but gradually transformed themselves into rulers through a combination of military conquest, political maneuvering, and economic exploitation. Their rule lasted nearly 200 years, leaving deep scars on India's economy, society, and politics.